Welcome to the CRNS webinar. This is the last webinar of this year as far as the current schedule is. And the talk today is by Dr. Marcela Munera and master student María, José, Pinto, Bernal from the Colombian School of Engineering, Julio Garavito. And the talk is a follow-up talk of the talk from last week, where we introduced the CASTOR robot, a low-cost social soft robot used for care or in care settings, specifically with children. This week, we're looking into the participatory design in making parts of the CASTOR robot, as well as a clinical evaluation. And what we'll do is, for the session, we'll start with a video talk by Marcela and María José, and then we go into a live Q&A session with both of them. At the end of the session, when everything is wrapped up, we will create a video which will go onto our CRNS website, which you can see in the stream. Thanks again for joining in today. For any questions, feel free to use the chat. And after the presentation, I will take those questions and will ask Marcela and María José the questions live so they can answer them.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Marcela Munera. I'm an assistant professor in the Colombian School of Engineering, Julio Garavito. And today I'm going to talk to you about the participatory design and clinical evaluation of the CASTOR robot. This is the second part of this seminar about this project. As I was talking the first part of the seminar, the idea of this project was born because there is a lot of evidence about social robotics in autism. Social robots are seen to improve assistance in the diagnosis process and improve some skills for children with ASD, as it provides new sensory stimulus, improves imitation, attention, reduces anxiety, and other activities that can be developed with this kind of robots. So the aim of this project was to develop a social robot that was created using focus group design and participatory design. And it was a project that is developed between our school, the Colombian School of Engineering, and Plymouth University, with the help of two companies. One, Tejido de Sueños, that is a Colombian company that provides the guidance and assistance in the participatory design, and one that is Fieldwork Robotics, that help us to design the robot. So the idea was to build a robot that was at a lower cost than the ones found in the commercial, that it was easy to repair and to build, and it was really hard to break. So the steps that we are going to talk about today for this project is about what we do with the community. So with the community, we did several steps in order to have a robot that was accepted by them and that was going to be used in therapy. So it was divided in 5 steps. One was to identify the opportunities provided by the community and the therapists. Where can we put this robot? What can we do? 2, what's a participative design? From the participative design, we obtained the concerns, fears, and expectations of the community about this robot, and also the most relevant parameters for conducting the robot behavior. 3 was development of the tool. That this is the main part of the previous part of the seminar, so you can check that on YouTube. 4 was experimental test that we conducted with the robot. And last, it was a usage survey in order to improve the development of the robot. So in the first part, we want to identify the opportunities. We want to know how we can help this community. This is a clinic we work with. It's called Howard Gardner. Howard Gardner is a clinic where they do integral therapy for children with ASD and other neurodiversity syndromes. So they work with several therapists. They have psychologists, speech therapists, occupational therapists, physical therapists that work together with children in order to improve their skills. So what we did, it was this identify the opportunities. First, we put other social robots, commercial platforms, as now at ONO, and we see how was a spontaneous interaction with the therapist, the children, and the robots. We saw some improvement in verbal skills. The children were verbal towards either the therapist or the caregiver when they were interacting with the robots. Also, we saw a great improvement of attention. The children wouldn't stop looking at the robots and will interact with them all the time. We saw also some opportunities in motor skills. Every time the robot would move her upper limbs or do something with his eye, the children would imitate. We saw some social interaction and joint attention. The children saw when the therapist was pointed at the robots and also when robots were pointing at something. We saw as opportunity for the social robot to be a toy to play with the children. And also we saw some social skills at adult seeking. That's when the children is interacting with the robot and he looks at her caregiver to see what the caregiver thinks about it. This, of course, is not results. It's a previous observation we did of what can we do and what can be possible with social robots. Then we ask the community. We say, okay, we are going to build a robot. There is a robot that is arriving to the clinic. What do you want from this robot? So we put the ONO robot and a suggestion box where they can put everything they want about this robot, just to have a wide range of ideas from the people. In this case, the community is all the therapists from the clinic and also the caregivers, that is parents or other people that are taking care of the children. So we have a lot of words and ideas from this robot in this activity. We saw that it was important, the appearance of the robot, and also that this appearance has to have some parts that are very important for the activities that are going to be developed. The robot should have a mouth, should have eyes, should have child proportions. They have to have natural components, textile. It has to look like a human. It has to be big. Some ideas about the material. They suggested plastic because they were thinking about the easy to clean and other ideas. Again, this is not results. This is general ideas that we have from this first interaction. Also, we ask in this first interaction, how important is that the robot integrates some characteristics? So we put a list of different characteristics that we found in commercial social robots, like mouth movement, lower limbs movement, touch sensors, sounds, movement sensors, and the people were prioritizing them and saying what is more important. So we saw that the first more important is mouth movement and upper lips movement. And along with mouth movement, we have eye movement and eyebrows movement. And when we ask about why these characteristics are so important, they talk about the expressions. And the robot be able to imitate some emotions so the children can recognize them and imitate them. It is some of the social skills that the children with ASD has some difficulty with. Then in a second part, we have the possibility to reproduce audio sounds and touch sensors. The robots will be, they want a robot that is able to know when the children is touching them. And also in the last part, we have lower limbs movement and sound sensors. So with this idea, we recollect them and have some ideas for our robot. So the robot expression should be as similar as possible to human expressions. That's why we need two eyes, eyebrows, and a mouth in order to reproduce these expressions. It is convenient that the robot has elements to personalize, so that the robot has clothing or accessories like a hat or a tie that the the children can put on and off whatever they want to, in order for the children to feel that this robot has a connection, a personal connection with them. Then the robot must have some general parts. It has to have a head, a trunk, upper extremities, and lower extremities. Even if in the steps before we saw that the movement in these lower extremities are not as important, it is important for them that they are there, that the robot has lower extremities in order to work on proprioception. That is the ability for the children to know where the body part is, to identify the names of different body parts. Also, the robot's eyes should be at the same height as the children's eyes when it's interacting with them, because eye contact is also a skill that is difficult for children with ASD, and that is worked on the therapies. And the parts of the face should be large and marked to facilitate the recognition of expressions. So that's why they suggested child proportions. So the eyes are big and the mouth is big regarding the face in general and the head. So the next step we did was of some participative design. In this participative design, we did some focal groups. The idea here was listen to what the parents and therapists had to say, observe and perceive what their concerns was. So we did different activities. We did a context mapping that's kind of a questionnaire where we asked the most common activities between the children and their parents, the children and the therapists, the activities that is more easy to them, the activities that are more difficult to them. And also we asked questions that we wanted to know, for example, what are the fears about using the robots. So we asked, okay, now there is a robot in therapy. Describe your worst case scenario. How do you think this could fail? So the parents express things like, the children will talk to me anymore because he just wants to talk to the robots, or he will lose human contact or human touch because he's interacting with the robot. So this is a very important thing, and is a fear that is consistent in this use of social robots in different rehabilitation scenarios we have worked with in our group. And is people are afraid that robots will take away this human contact. So in order to avoid that and avoid this fear, we explain that in every one of the applications that we are developing, always the robot is going to work in collaboration with the therapists or healthcare staff. That is, we are building a robot that will work with the therapists, with the speech therapists, of the psychologists, or the occupational therapists, with them in therapy, never instead of them. So that's one of the things we make clear with our focal groups before we continue asking other questions. Also, we want to know where the main concerns are, what they want from this robot. So we ask questions as, okay, imagine that you have a magic wand. What do you want this wand to do in order to you for work with your children? And we saw that one of the main concerns for parents are about the recognition of emotions for the children, and also for the verbalization. There are several children with ASD that are not verbal, that is that they don't talk with words, even if there is nothing wrong physiological for them to talk. It's just one of the conditions that can be developed in ASD. So we know that also we have to work in these characteristics and these skills because it's important for the parents. We make them also do a collage. So we take different parts in order to see the main characteristics that the robot should have, and a robot design with some recycled materials. So in this part, we saw that it was consistent with the first part. Always the robot had two eyes, a nose, and a mouth. And there are some characteristics that are not as consistent. For example, none of the robots have ears. So it's not as an important part of the rest because it doesn't make part of the expression and emotions. Also, we saw that always the robot had upper limbs and lower limbs, so it was consistent with the activity we did before. And last, we did a prioritization activity. That is, we showed several activities that has been developed with social robots in children with DSD in the literature. And we asked the therapist, in this case, okay, what is the most important activity for you to develop with this new robot? So there are some potentialities that were identified with the use of the robot. First, we saw that they wanted to facilitate the work of the therapist and reduce the fatigue generated by the therapist. In the work of children with ASD, there is a high percentage of therapists that get burned out or out of fatigue because the workload is very high for them. We saw also that it was important to facilitate children's emotion recognition, as has been said. Also to increase children motivation during the therapist. For the therapist, it's very hard to maintain the attention of the children during the activities. That makes very hard to develop the different activities, and also it increases the workload that I talked in the first point. So if the robot can maintain this attention and create an engagement with the children, it could facilitate the development of the activities. Other things that were talked about in these focal groups is to generate conscience about DSD in the community. There is in countries like Colombia in Latin America, there is a lot of is a taboo subject. There is not much talk about this subject, so the people doesn't know about the condition for children with DSD, and parents suffer for this in their day-to-day life. Also is to generate children's confidence and calm during therapies. Children can have a high anxiety level during therapies, and that makes difficult the development of new skills, and also to be an aid in crisis management. So children with DSD can have behavioral crisis. That is, the children have a crisis when he can be violent against others or against himself. So the therapist wants to build something that let us know when this crisis is coming. This is something we don't work in right now, but we have an ideas to begin working in this area in the future. So from the focal groups, we obtain also some features to consider as possible risk from the use of social robots in the therapies with children with DSD. One of them I talked about before was losing the human component in therapies. This is a concern for caregivers and therapists. So we make sure to say that always the robot is going to be a tool. The robot is going to be used by the healthcare staff in their therapies, and is not a replacement for their therapists, nor a replacement for the healthcare staff. So always the robot is going to be a tool in these therapies. The second one is that the use of the social robot can generate stress, fear, or frustration in children. We saw in the first steps when we put some commercial robots like Ono and Now in the clinic that sometimes when the robot moves and the children hasn't been introduced to the robot, the children can have fear about it. So we make sure that the robot is always introduced, that the therapy say to the children, this is a robot, it's going to move and talk, but it's a machine, it's like a toy. So to introduce them to this technology, and we have seen that this reduces this stress, fear, and frustration. And also, it's very important that the robot is never used as a negative reinforcement. We saw some therapists that wanted to say, okay, if you don't do this activity, I will take you to the robot, in the case that the children were scared of the robot. This is something that cannot be done, and we make sure that the therapist understood that before going in the use of the robot. The third feature to consider is that the interaction with the robot should reduce or may reduce the interaction with other persons. So the literature shows that actually the interaction with the robots improves social skills, and we are constantly researching. In the case that we see a therapy where the use of the robot reduce this social interaction, will stop immediately this kind of therapy. The idea is always that the robot reinforce this interaction with the therapist and the caregiver. And it's something that we have seen since the beginning, since the first interactions, that when there is the robot, there is adult seeking, the child is looking to a caregiver in order to have an idea of what is happening, what is this robot talking to me. So we have seen that this is working. Also, another concern is the difficulties initiating therapies due to children's behavioral factors. So we want to work on how to introduce the robot to the children in the therapies in order to make easy this attention and interaction during the therapy. Also, we obtain some opportunities from the roles functionality that are interesting for the parents and caregivers and therapists. First, the idea of teaching through imitation. This is for the recognition of emotion and also for the proprioception. That is the movement also of the upper limbs. Second, to teaching the emotion expressions, recognition, and imitation. Third is to improve language and communication skills. So that the children has to talk to a robot in order to continue with the activity. And fourth is the sensory stimulation. Some children with ASD have problems with sensory and touch and different textures. So if in the robot we can include this, it can make part of the therapy for this sensory stimulation. So from the focal groups, we ask also what kind of skills can be worked with the children with ESD with the social robot. So some of the most important skills they want to work with the social robots is the communication. Second, the motor abilities, as we said before, that's why it's important the movement of upper limbs. Three, the preschool skills, so like the knowledge of letters and numbers and stuff like this. Fourth is also a great tool for free play, and there is a lot of literature about how free play can improve the skills from children with ESD. Fifth is the emotional well-being, as we said before, to reduce anxiety about the therapies and improve the engagement and also the enjoyment of the children for these therapies. And six, the interaction and interpersonal relationships, as we said before, that this can improve the interaction with the caregiver and also the therapist. So at this point, we had a pretty good idea of what the people wanted about the robot in terms of the therapies to be developed and the movement of the robot and of all sort of stuff. But we wanted to know also about the preference of robot appearance. So what things can and cannot have the robot in the exterior. So for parents and therapists, they wanted something friendly, tender, and also a childlike appearance. And this is very important because this was a very important characteristic for parents and therapists, but we will see not so much for the kids. Also for parents and therapists, they wanted something interactive, maybe with digital elements as a screen and with interchangeable pieces. For the kids, they show a greater preference for robots with animal appearance or something that it was fantastic or that didn't look real. And a lower preference for robots with human appearance. And also they will have preference for big eyes and ears. So because they didn't seem to agree, we wanted to explore this appearance a little bit more. So we came with different steps for this. So the first step we did was a questionnaire for therapists and parents. We showed them different kind of sketches of what the appearance of the robot could be, and they did a ranking of these sketches. So there were different scores. The sketches with the highest scores were the one that looked like a child, like this 43 and 44. And second, we have some that looks like the idea of cartoon robots that the people has in their minds. The less score was the one that looks like animals or something fantastic like a monster or other futuristic characters. For the children, we didn't do a direct questionnaire. We took these sketches that were shown in the slide before, and we did a ranking activity. Okay, so from these robots, which one do you want to play with? Which one do you want to color the robots? And then at the end, which one do you want to take home? So this way we have a pretty good idea of the ranking of which appearance they like more in this step. So for the children, we found what we found before, and that's that they prefer something that looks like an animal or a futuristic idea of a fantastic creature. So for working on this difference between what the parents want, therapists want, and children want, we decided to develop three different appearance. One is that is robot-like, one that is human-like, and one that is fantastic-like. And the idea is to develop experimental protocol to see if there is difference and to see if that we can address the concerns that the therapists have. So our concern is that something that looks like human-like will have less attention than the other forms of appearance. And the parent's concern is that in a robot-like or fantastic creature, it will be more difficult for children to recognize emotions or recognize the parts of the body. So we will develop some experimental protocols to see the difference between these three appearances. So in the development, we have all the mechanical part of the tool, and that is we develop something that can protect itself for the movement of the children, like impact, and it can be huggable, and all of this is well explained in the first part of the seminar. So if you see in the first part of the seminar, all the mechanics involved in this mechanical design is explained. So the next step in our study is the experimental test. And for this, a master's student, María José, is going to explain to you the experimental test we did with the robot and the usage survey.
Thank you, Marcela, for your presentation. Well, hi, area assistant to this second seminar. As Marcela said, my name is María José, and today I'm going to talk about the clinical evaluation of the CASTOR robot. This evaluation, the design was designed based on the outcome that we had in the participatory design, and that we stated for Marcela before. And basically, this study was based on the emotion recognition task. And for that, I'm going to start with this first study, where the main objective of this work was to determine the CASTOR functionality, the acceptability of in the ASD therapy, as well as to identify the most effective appearances in the development of the emotion recognition activity. As we see before, we have three appearances of the CASTOR, and one of the concerns of the clinician was to know if the appearances of the different appearances of the CASTOR can influence or not influence in the performance of the child. So basically, the validation of this study was conducted in the clinical Howard Garden at Bogota, Colombia, and a total of 21 children were enrolled in this study, forming three groups, groups of 7 participants, and each group was corresponding for age appearances. So regarding to the experimental setup, the standard layout is illustrated in the figure 1 when we found the two divisions. The first division, named experimental area, when we found the child therapists and robots, and the other room called like a remote control area where the researchers control the movements of the castor. So basically in the experimental area we have cameras in order to record the sessions, and after like a deeper analysis, and also we have a face tracking system online to have the eyes contact with the child all the time. Well, as mentioned before, this study was based on emotion, imitation, and recognition tasks. So for that, we proposed two activities: a control activity that we use a card, like a basic emotions. So here the therapist asked to identify the emotion displayed in the cards to the child, and um, the intervention like activity that we use only the 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 robot, only a CASTOR, I'm sorry. So with that we want to analyze the effect of CASTOR and its appearance during the activities. So in the control phase, the session were conducted only with the therapist and the card. So the child were instructed to identify a raw emotion like fear, happiness, sadness, or anger, and using 4 cards. Then the child were asked to imitate the emotion shown in the cards, but in the intervention phase, the cards were no longer required. So the robot began to perform the 4 raw emotions randomly, and the therapy asked the child to identify and imitate depending of the task. So these tasks were so relevant for this study due to the importance of the emotion recognition to establish relationship and with others, and as well as the fact is plays a critical role in everyday communication. That is stated for the clinician in the participatory essay, as Marcela stated before. So regarding the results, we can see here the motivation and the courage of the child during the therapy, and how they interact with CASTOR, and how they recognize or imitate the activity. Well, firstly, we validate if the group was homogeneously and was homogeneously. So then we want to know if the CASTOR appearance influenced during the performance, and we found no statistical differences. So the CASTOR appearances not include the children performance. So no matter what is the appearance, the performance of the child not influence and is the same. On the other hand, we analyze the children performance between control and intervention phase. I mean, with CARS and with CASTOR. So the results show that children performance no change or improved by the robot. So, however, instead that not change, we found different difficulties to describe some emotion, as we can see in the next slide. Here we we here we did a post hoc test among emotion, and we found that overall happiness and sadness were correctly labeled and matched, but participants often confused during some emotion as anger. So this indicates that more challenging emotion or more complex emotion as anger were for more challenging to identify and discriminate, in contrast to happiness and sadness like more simple emotion. But also these results indicate that we don't find significant differences between sadness and anger. That happen because children confuse more the time anger expression with sadness expression. So these results indicate that CASTOR anger needs to be improved. Regarding CASTOR has only subtle difference between these emotions. For example, only pupil contraction for sadness or pupil dilatation for fear. So this discrepancy can be overlooked by the children, generally confusion among these emotions that we analyze and we show in this study. So on the other hand, respect to the child attention, which is reported in the figure 5, in terms of the appearances, we note that the one of gained the most attention was the robot-like outfit. So around the 72% of the attention had these appearances. On the other side, CASTOR presence impacts children attention, as we can note in the videos before, and children devote more attention to the activity, and no matter what appearance was, the devote of the attention was there. Also, this suggests that the child improved their attention, eye contact, and interest in the therapy with the CASTOR presence. That is so nice. On the other hand, we expect these results regarding the appearances because, as said Marcela before, the results of the participatory design show the interest of the child in robot appearance or fantastic appearance. So we expected that like fantastic like or robot like gaining more attention with the child. Well, with this result, we designed the second study. In the second study, we only use a robot-like appearance because they gained the most attention in this study. So basically, the second study was based on a proprioception activity in order to identify some parts of the castor body. So with that, we analyze the effect of physical interaction and also validate the resistance of the castor with physical interaction. So in this context, two objectives were established. The first one was determine if physical interaction with SARS promotes spontaneous interaction, and the second one analyze the behavior of children during the therapy. To this end, a total of 35 children diagnosed with ESD were enrolled in this study, forming two different groups, and control groups and intervention group. Control with 17 participants and intervention with 18. Basically, the activity consisted as and one perception activity. So before the starting the activity, CASTOR began with a greeting to the child as showed the video, and inviting him to play and motivating him to do the activity. Then the robot identified one part of the body, saying like, "This is my head." Then it asked to the child, "Can you please show me your head?" According to the child answer, the robot will provide different sentences. For example, if the answer was correct, the robot responds with a positive sentences like "well done," "good job." But if the answer was not correct, the robot encouraged the child to try again. Once the activity is over, the CASTOR says goodbye to the participant, and that is the end of the session. The human body parts to be identified were head, eyes, nose, and mouth. Now, the difference between groups were that the children in the control group could not have physical interaction with the robot. Therefore, the therapist had to stop them if they intended to touch the robot. In contrast, the intervention group were free to touch a CASTOR whenever they wanted. As we can see in the second video, intervention group, the child is free to touch the robot whenever they want. But in the control group, the child performs the activity, but they can touch this kind of interaction. So, but we can see the motivation or the interaction of the child during the activities. So regarding the performance of this group between the activities, we found that the physical interaction does not influence children's performance during the proprioception activity. Also, it was expected that the performance increased when the children interact directly with the robot. Doesn't happen. However, this result suggests that the robot presence does not influence negatively with the clinician roles during the therapy, and the children were able to follow the instruction of the therapist all the time. In the same way, we validate the emotional response, social interaction, and tactile interaction during the therapy. So this is illustrated in this figure. Although this trip variable is higher in intervention groups, only the tactile interaction presents significant differences. That was expected due to the experimental setup, because it was only that they can touch freely with the robot, so that is like we expected. However, we analyzed what happened with the control groups. So we found that despite they can touch the robot, the interaction with touch the robot exists. So 47% of the children who present intention event and the 17% of children present more than 3 events. That is so important. Besides, despite despite the effect, we analyzed the effect of the child during the therapy in terms of motivation, effect of feelings and we found that some childs in the control group not present the same encouragement and motivation in the session. Even we have a case in one a child, his level of stress and anxiety increased during the therapy because he wanted to touch robot to touch CASTOR all the time, and it was not allowed to do that. So the behavior of the child was no better. It was worse instead. So this is showed important to interact the CASTOR without restriction. On the other hand, we analyze the behavior of the intervention group, and specifically we analyze the prompted and spontaneous behavior. The prompted behavior occurred or was done mostly when the therapist encouraged the child to show some part of the CASTOR body. For example, the therapist will say, "Those are my eyes. Where are the CASTOR eyes?" So there is the behavior of child response to this instruction. In contrast, the spontaneous behavior occurs without premeditation or any constraint in this figure, so like a natural way to like the behavior of the child. And we note that the spontaneous behavior occurs more than 70% compared to the prompted behavior. That is so important because this is like a way of communication, a principal way to start to communicate with physical interaction with somebody. So influence that, promote that is like a important important thing. So these findings suggest that CASTOR promotes tactile interaction, which is an essential aspect considering that is a critical for the typical physiological development in children, and is the most basic form of communication. Finally, we did a use of survey in order to compare like the acceptability of the clinician. So basically we did by the acceptability in the social acceptability and practical acceptability, where the social acceptability we measured in the participatory design when Marcela explained how the society viewed the robots. But now we want to know, okay, you know the robot now. So what do you perceive? What is your perception about CASTOR? So for that, we did a questionnaire based on and robot social attribute scales, ethical acceptability scales, and accepted based on UTA-UT. This is important to highlight this. We don't have all the results because we are doing this stage right now, but I'm going to state like the most important thing that we found in the preliminary result. There's some clinician that we did the questionnaire now, right now. But basically the questionnaire had a question like if they consider that the robot can benefit for the patient, if they feel safe using the robot in their therapies, and other question that we found in the physical in the participatory design that was very important. For example, they consider that they help them to carry out faster the activities or faster the therapy that is like unconcerned or like they wanted, and also we validate the ethical acceptances, and if they feel they hope feel with CASTOR, or if feel they maybe can replace them, there is another aspect that they worry about. But basically the preliminary result state that clinician say that the children feel safe, calm, and comfortable and interested in the company of CASTOR within the therapy, and they even report that some children with CASTOR present with those their anxiety levels, and the therapy will be more friendly, more easily to do, so they feel less exhausted after do the therapy with CASTOR. So with this, with the above, it's possible to determine a positive acceptance of child towards CASTOR and the importance of participatory design, which allow us to see rewarding results in these studies. Finally, it's important to say that the last stage of this project is going to do the next year, where we want to validate a long-term therapy. So we are going to be more specific for each child. We are going to do like session of therapy according to their necessities, their functionalities, and according to different activities that they are like standard activities in the clinical, and to analyze the effect of the impacts of the robot, but in long terms, in long terms. And this is all for me and for Marcela today. We hope that we expected that we enjoy this seminar, enjoy this presentation and this project, and we are here to respond any questions that you have. And thank you so much to be here today and for your attention.
Thank you, Marcela and Maria José, for this really nice talk, and the Colombian School of Engineering at Julio Garavito. So are there any questions regarding the talk and the design and also the evaluation done with the CASTOR robot? So if you have any questions, feel free to use the chat or enable your microphone and ask the questions directly. If there are no early questions, and I might start. So when I looked at the evaluation, when you compared the three variations of the CASTOR robot using the childlike appearance, the robot appearance, and the fantastic appearance, from what I can see, all of the three are still bipedal, so they're humanoid in shape. Have you considered switching to a shape which does not resemble a humanoid, such as, for example, if you compare other social robots, you have the Paro, which looks like a seal. You have the Biro robot, which looks like a rabbit donkey, or you have the robot from Edinburgh. From the Edinburgh Robotics, which also looks like a small boy. But have you considered other shapes which move further away from the expectancy of looking like a human?
So maybe I can answer that.
Yeah.
So
In the participatory design, for the therapists and parents, they really wanted something like that looked human. It was actually had a lot of convincing for them to have something that looks like an animal or that looks like fantastic, because they didn't agree of try to do therapy on emotion recognition and proprioception with something that doesn't look human. So I think to go farther away from this humanoid form, but yeah, it's still a humanoid form, but in the form of a robot or a animal, fantastic like, it will be harder for us to convince them that this is it could be useful. So that's one of the ideas of the participatory design, was to have something that they will agree easily to use in the clinic. And this is first, there is some kind of resistance to this technology, as I was saying, because they are afraid of replacement of the jobs. And secondly, because they have, so particularly in this clinic, they have had a bad experience with researchers, people that goes and do a study and never come back. They don't know what the study says or anything. So we try to maintain a relationship with them going, well, before the pandemic, we went to the clinic every month or every 2 months to say what we were doing. So I think to go farther away for this could be interesting, but could be harder for us to try at the clinic.
Thank you for that answer. Yes, I can see that it's the same. It's a similar approach if you look at European institutions, that there's sort of a fear of technology taking over control and removing sort of the responsibility of the therapist or making them obsolete. Which is, it's nice that this was one of the purposes of your project, to communicate that clearly, that this is not a replacement of a therapist, but an additional tool or helper or aid to relieve the burden or give additional quality to it. And it was interesting to see when I looked at the study that the children wanted something completely different from the parents. That's always an assumption. If you look at research, it's like, yes, I want to build this. And then you look at the actual user and they want something completely different. Are there any other questions? I can go on if nobody else has a question.
I have a question.
Okay, Martin.
Hi, Marcela. Hi, Maria. Nice. Thank you for good talks. I missed the first part. Sorry, it's a bit late, but I just wanted to know, like, on the basis of your studies and your interaction with these kids, you're thinking out towards the next generation of the robot. Do you have any additional requirements now in terms of what movements it should make, how dynamic it should be, if there's any physical interaction things we can do that are a bit more coordinated with the kids? So any ideas on that?
So for the continuation of the project, we are thinking about something also that can be controlled by the therapist. So we are working on this friendly interface, so the therapist can control the robot at the emotions. We need to work on speech. The robot doesn't, it has some speech to text, but it's not very natural, not very easy to understand yet. So we work, I don't know if Carlos mentioned it in the first seminar, but we work for these experimental protocols in a camera system to look at the gaze of the children, where he was looking. So it will be interesting also to integrate this at the robot. No, for now is the robot and a camera system that is outside of them. I don't know if Maria Jose has something to add.
Well, besides, we are thinking in like a face recognition, in order that when the child is in the therapy, the CASTOR can recognize them and say that many of the child be like more specific the therapy for the child and be like more friendly for them. That is like the other step that we hope the next year.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Mario.
So just correct me if I'm wrong. So as far as I understood, all the experiments involving participants and therapists and clinicians have been conducted in one clinic, only one. So are you considering, did you try to propose the same approach in different clinics, or what kind of resistance did you get? What are the opportunities at the moment to expand this technology also in other?
Yeah, so we work with one clinic. However, it's a big clinic in Bogota that has 3 different sites. So it's like 3 different clinics, but they have the same approach. We also talk with another clinic that works more from the physical disabilities point of view. They work with children with cerebral palsy and Down syndrome, but also they do gait rehabilitation, but they do also this kind of cognitive therapies. And we were going to start with them at the beginning of this year. But yeah, so since April, we haven't been able to do anything experimental and less with children for the moment. But yeah, we were thinking about expanding these therapies to other clinics.
And do you think that the platform could be improved, and in the case yes, how, also to address different types of disabilities of children?
Yes, as I was saying with the interface, so for now, it's really easy to use the emotions. It's like a emoji type of thing in Telegram. You put the emoji and the robot reproduce. So to program more emotions will be useful. And then to program some kind of games with the robot. I think this work in the interface could be interesting. But for the, and also for the physical part, so the movement still limited for the build of the joints. It's not full range of motion in the upper limb, and yeah, that could be also improved. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe also, as I was saying, the speech and the camera system integrated to the robot. If you have any new ideas, also, if anyone has ideas of how we can improve our robot, we would like to hear it.
Sure.
There's a bit. There was a recent PhD graduate. She's finishing her work right now, so it will be published soon. Her name is Marcela. She's one of the PhD students in Plymouth, and her work is on emotion representation through body movement, which might be quite beneficial. So what she uses a now as a base, which is not, yeah, it's a social robot which has a couple of limitations, but it uses the embodiment of its movement to convey emotional responses. And I can see that some of that can be applied also to CASTOR in a way. As his upper body movement works really well. That would be something to convey the message of emotions, which was one of the more controversial things in your findings. You could see that there's a disparity between identification and creation of emotional responses. And that's really similar to some of her findings. So integrating some of that work might be beneficial, because she tried to move away from pre-designed emotional sort of movement cycles to automative created ones, which might be worth investigating. Are there any other questions from people in the audience? Otherwise, we can continue talking amongst ourselves if that's not the case.
I wanted to add, also more than the continuation of the development of the robot, we want to continue, when it will be possible, the experimental protocols. We want to see what happens in a long-term interaction, if the children get used to the robot or get bored by the robot, if the attention increases, decreases. Yeah, so what happens if we try to integrate this? We were designing a protocol to do a kind of a research in different areas, more than emotion recognition, and in long term. So yeah, that's one of the ideas we have also for the future with the robot.
Yeah. No, that's one of the things which apply to most of the social robots, that there's initially a novelty phase where in any kind of new tool children really like for the time when it's new. You give them an iPad and they really like it. You give them a phone, they really like it. You give them a stuffed toy and they really like it. And after a while, you see the added bonus of the actual sort of entity, which is quite nice. So that's an interesting study because you rarely see social robotic studies which go beyond the novelty. So they do a study for a week and the robot is completely new, but they don't see how it actually affects over long term the communication between therapist, child, and robot after the novelty wears off. This is the key challenge from my current point of view, which is quite nice.
Yeah, so we have seen this in another study we have in cardiac rehabilitation, but we use the now robot, and we did a long term. It was 36 sessions, about 18 weeks, and there is a combination of effects. So the person gets adapted to the robot, which is nice because it understands better what the robot says, it answers faster what the robot is asking, but it also loses engagement to the therapy and to the interaction with the robots. So we were trying methodology with memory, as María José was saying, with the recognition of the face and calling the patients by their name. And this improves a little bit the interaction. So we would like to try, because it's different, the loss of disengagement and the novelty effect in children and than in elderly adults. That is the case we had in cardiac rehabilitation. So we would like to know what happens in the long term with children, because it can change a lot.
Yeah, no, it is really interesting. And as I mentioned before, so for the people who are watching, we're building a version of the CASTOR robot in Plymouth soon, in collaboration with the team from the Colombian School of Engineering as well. So that's one thing. So if you're local in Plymouth or in the area and you're interested in collaborating, working, testing, feel free to get in contact. Also, more of the documentation about building the CASTOR robot will be online and available. So if you want to build your own, that's also one of the ways forward, which is really nice about this project compared to a large number of other research projects, where you see research and you think, I would really like to test this one, but it's a one-off robot and you can't access it anymore. So this is one of the key benefits I can see from the CASTOR robot, that it is accessible, reproducible, and provides all sort of the requirements of the scientific method. One thing I should mention is Philippa mentioned to say thank you for the talk, and that's one thing which I also want to say. Thank you, Marcela and María, José, and the team of the School of Engineering for the really good talks and the really interesting topics. So I can clap, but it looked last time really odd on the video, so I just stopped that for now, but it was a really good talk.
Thank you very much also for my side, Marcela and Maria. Very nice and interesting talk. Thank you very much for contributing to this series of events supported by CRNS and all the team. On behalf of all our research team, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So one thing I want to mention is the talk will go live onto our webpage as a recording in a couple of days. So we'll do a couple of cuts to make sort of some of the weird hiccups I had in between go away. And then you can freely access and share it. The video will be on YouTube as well. So you can just see that. So if somebody missed the talk and you want to send them a link, that's possible afterwards. Thank you again. And one thing I want to wish you, as this is the last talk before Christmas, I all want to wish you a nice end of the year from the CRNS and from me, and a good new year 2021 afterwards.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
guys.
Bye.
Bye,
Merry
thank
Christmas.
you.
Bye.
Ciao.